I've spent more than 8 decades watching markets rise and fall, watching fortunes built overnight and then lost just as quickly, and every time people say the same thing. This time it's different, but I'll tell you something, it's never different. Human nature hasn't changed. Greed and fear are the same now as they were in 1929. And what I'm seeing today, well, I'll be honest with you, it worries me, because what's coming next could wipe out more wealth for seniors than any downturn we've seen since the Great Depression. Now, I know that sounds dramatic. You might be thinking, Buffett's exaggerating, he's being alarmist, but I'm not. In fact, the truth is worse than you think. Most seniors, good, hardworking people who did everything right, are about to face a financial shock they're not prepared for. And here's the thing, it's not because they made bad investments. It's because the system they trusted has quietly been changing underneath it. It'll be too late. Now, I'll explain exactly what I mean. And before we're done today, I'll tell you the single most important move you can make right now to protect yourself and your home. But let's start with what's actually happening, because this story doesn't begin with banks or interest rates. It begins with behavior. You see, people tend to think financial crashes are caused by events, interest rates rising, stock prices falling, housing markets slowing down, but those are just symptoms. The real cause is always psychological, and right now the psychology of this country is broken. We've trained an entire generation to believe debt is wealth, that if you can borrow it, you can afford it, and that's a dangerous illusion. For seniors, especially those on fixed incomes, this mindset is deadly, because as inflation eats away at purchasing power and interest rates rise, more and more retirees are being squeezed quietly, slowly into financial traps that will eventually force them out of their homes. I've seen it before. Back in the early 1980s, I watched as retirees lost everything they had, saved because they trusted safe bonds that were paying high interest rates until inflation destroyed their real value. And then I saw it again in 2008 when people thought their home equity made them rich. When the housing bubble burst, some of those same people couldn't afford their property taxes or mortgage payments anymore. Today the pattern is repeating, but it's disguised differently. We've built an economy that's running on fumes, credit cards, home equity loans, and inflated property valuations. And for seniors, that's a perfect storm, because as soon as one piece of that puzzle gives way, whether it's the market, the dollar, or home values, everything else starts to collapse with it. Now, let me make a bold claim here, and I want you to think about this carefully. The next housing crash won't begin with young people defaulting. It'll begin with seniors liquidating. That's right. The trigger this time won't be first-time buyers walking away from bad loans. It'll be retirees being forced to sell because they can't afford to stay. Why? Because they've been tricked into thinking they can outlive inflation by chasing yield, by buying dividend stocks, by refinancing their homes, by dipping into 401ks they were supposed to protect. And they've been told, don't worry, the market always comes back. But that advice only works if you have time. Seniors don't have time. They don't have 20 years to wait for a recovery, and that's what nobody wants to say out loud. I was at a meeting not long ago with some people in Washington, and I said, look, we're sitting on the edge of a demographic time bomb. You've got 70 million baby boomers retiring, living longer than any generation before them, and their savings rate is lower than it's ever been. What happens when inflation stays high for another 5 years? Do you know what they said? They said, that's a political problem. No, it's a human problem. People are going to lose their homes, not because they made mistakes, but because nobody warned them that the rules changed. Let me give you an example. Let's say you own your home outright. You worked 30, 40 years to pay it off. You're proud of that. You feel secure, but property taxes have doubled in 10 years. Your insurance premiums are through the roof. And if you live in Florida or California or Texas, you're watching your monthly expenses go up by hundreds of dollars, even though you're supposedly debt-free. Now you can cover that for a while, but when your savings start to shrink and you're living off Social Security, you'll reach a point where you have to make a choice, sell your home or take out a reverse mortgage. And that's exactly how most seniors lose control of their wealth, through small incremental decisions made under pressure. You see, financial collapse doesn't happen in a day. It happens drip by drip, quietly. Understand, the next crash won't come from Wall Street. It'll come from Main Street, from retirees cashing out of their assets to survive. And when that wave hits, and it will hit, it'll trigger something far bigger than a housing correction. It'll be a wealth transfer unlike anything we've seen in modern history. Now, before I explain how that transfer works, I want to remind you of something I said in 2008. I told investors to be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful. That advice still stands, but it needs updating, because today people don't even realize they're being greedy. They're being passively greedy, chasing returns, following the crowd, thinking the bull market will last forever. And that's far more dangerous than panic. The greed I see now is subtle. It's seniors putting their last $50,000 into dividend ETFs because they need income. It's people taking out HELOCs because housing always goes up. It's the quiet belief that the system will save them. But I'll tell you something, the system doesn't care about your security. The system cares about liquidity. And when liquidity dries up, when people stop buying, stop borrowing, stop believing, that's when the real pain begins. Now, I promised I'd share the single indicator that will tell you when that shift has begun. And we're getting close, very close. I'll get to that in a few minutes. But first, you have to understand what's happening underneath the surface, because it's invisible unless you're looking for it. Let's talk about equity extraction. In the past 2 years, Americans have taken out over $400 billion in home equity lines of credit. Most of that money isn't being used for investment. It's being used for survival, groceries, medical bills, helping adult children. Now, that might sound harmless after all. It's their equity, right? But think of it like this. Every time you borrow against your home, you're essentially selling a piece of your future security. And here's the kicker. If housing prices fall by just 10 to 15%, millions of those loans will be underwater overnight. That means tens of thousands of seniors could wake up one morning to find out they owe more than their home is worth again. Sound familiar? It should. We saw it in 2008. But the difference now is that this time It's not young families defaulting, it's retirees who can't afford to hold on. And when that happens, banks don't negotiate compassionately. They don't care if you're 75 years old, they just want the balance cleared. That's the quiet part. No one's saying out loud. Now, I know this all sounds grim, but I want to be clear. This isn't about fear, it's about preparation. Because the truth is, those who understand what's coming can avoid the worst of it. They can turn what looks like a crisis into an opportunity. That's always been the pattern in history. Every crisis is just a wealth transfer money moving from the impatient to the patient, from the uninformed to the informed. And what I'm telling you today is exactly how to stay on the right side of that transfer. But first, let me address the biggest myth out there right now, the idea that housing always goes up. It doesn't. If you adjust for inflation, home prices in America have gone through 15 major declines in the last century. Some of them lasted 5 years, some lasted 20. And yet people keep saying, it's different this time. It's not. The fundamentals haven't changed. What's changed is the illusion of stability. People look at Zillow and think that's value. But value isn't what your neighbor's willing to pay. It's what your income can support. When income falls and debt stays high, prices must correct. That's not pessimism, that's arithmetic. And this correction, when it comes, will hit seniors hardest because most of them are house rich and cash poor. That means they'll have to sell at a loss just to free up liquidity. And when they do, institutions, hedge funds, private equity firms, foreign buyers will be waiting to buy those homes at pennies on the dollar. That's the transfer I mentioned earlier. Wealth doesn't disappear. It changes hands. Prepare now, they're the ones who'll be handing it over. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not predicting the end of America. I'm predicting a reset, a painful but necessary one, because you can't build lasting prosperity on a foundation of debt and denial. And the sooner we accept that, the sooner we can fix it. But that's not what most people want to hear. They want reassurance. They want someone to say, don't worry, things will bounce back. And that's why they'll lose. Because hope isn't a strategy. Preparation is. Now, by the end of this talk, I'll tell you exactly what I'm doing personally to prepare and what I think every senior should do in the next 6 months. But before we get there, I want to explain why most financial advice being given to seniors right now is actually setting them up for failure. You've probably heard the phrase, stay invested, ride it out. That's good advice if you're 30. It's terrible advice if you're 70, because when you're retired, sequence of returns risk, the order in which you experience gains and losses, can destroy your portfolio, even if the average return looks fine on paper. Let me give you an example. If you start with $500,000 and lose 20% in the first year of retirement, you need a 25% gain just to break even. But if you're withdrawing income at the same time, you'll never catch up. That's math, not emotion. And yet most financial planners ignore it because it's uncomfortable to admit that for seniors, the traditional buy and hold model is broken. The truth is, what worked for my generation in the 1960s and 70s doesn't work today. We're living longer, we're spending more, and the dollar buys less. If you plan to live on dividends and Social Security, you're planning to fail. And that's what I want to help you avoid. Now, I said earlier that I'd reveal the single indicator that tells me we're approaching the breaking point. And if you understand this one thing, you'll see what's coming months before the headlines catch up. It's not interest rates. It's not unemployment. It's not even inflation. It's delinquency velocity, the speed at which people start falling behind on their payments. See, it's one thing for a few people to miss payments. That happens in every cycle. But when the rate of missed payments begins to accelerate month over month across multiple sectors, that's when the dominoes start falling. And right now, that acceleration is happening quietly. Auto delinquencies are at their highest level in over a decade. Credit card defaults are climbing faster than at any point since 2009. And when you dig into the numbers, the most vulnerable group isn't young borrowers, it's people over 60. That's the signal. That's the canary in the coal mine. Because when seniors start defaulting, it means the system is under real stress. It means retirement income can no longer keep up with the cost of living. And when that happens, the next logical step is asset liquidation, selling homes, selling stocks, selling whatever they can just to stay afloat. That's the event that triggers the housing slide I warned about earlier. Now I want to pause for a second and make something clear. I'm not saying all seniors will lose their homes, but I am saying that most will face a point of decision, a moment when they're forced to choose between keeping their home or maintaining their quality of life. And if you wait until that moment to act, you've already lost the advantage. Preparation isn't about reacting, it's about positioning yourself before the storm hits. I learned that lesson the hard way back in 1973. That year, the stock market lost nearly half its value. I watched as some of the smartest investors in America panicked. They sold everything at the bottom, but a few people didn't panic. They waited. They understood that markets always swing too far in both directions. Those few came out far ahead, not because they were smarter, but because they were prepared. And that's what I want for you. I don't want you to panic. I want you to prepare. Because the next correction isn't about who has the most money. It's about who has the most patience and clarity. So what should seniors actually do right now? Let's break it down into a few simple steps. Step 1, reduce your dependence on variable income. That means stop chasing high yield investments that promise 8%, 9%, or 10%. Those are traps. They look safe until they're not. If someone promises you double the market's average return, they're selling you risk in disguise. Instead, focus on stability. You want assets that generate consistent, reliable cash flow, even if the yield is modest. The goal is not to get rich. The goal is to not go broke. Step 2, treat your home as an asset, not a trophy. Even if the yield is modest, the goal is not to get rich. The goal is to not go broke. Step 2, treat your home as an asset, not a trophy. Because people form emotional attachments to their homes. But remember, your house doesn't love you back. It's a financial instrument. And like any instrument, it needs to be managed wisely. If property taxes and maintenance are eating up more than 25% of your income, you're not living in your home, you're being drained by it. That's not comfort, that's captivity. Downsizing isn't failure, it's freedom. And yet, I meet people every day who say, I can't sell, this house means too much to me. Then 2 years later, they're forced to sell anyway, but at half the price, under stress, with regret. That's what I want you to avoid. If you make a decision while you still have control, it's empowerment. If you wait until the decision is made for you, it's loss. Step 3, hold liquidity. This is the most underrated strategy in America right now. Everybody wants to be fully invested. But liquidity, cash, short-term treasuries, easily accessible savings, is what keeps you alive in a downturn. When markets crash, cash becomes power. In 2008, I had billions in cash when the panic hit. That's how I was able to buy great companies at fire sale prices. I didn't predict the crash perfectly, but I was ready for it. Seniors can apply the same principle on a smaller scale. You don't need billions. You just need enough liquidity to survive 12 months without selling your core assets. That's your cushion. That's your insurance. If you can't survive a year without tapping into your home equity or your investments, you're overexposed. That's the truth nobody tells retirees because it's not exciting, but it's the difference between surviving and being swept away. Step 4, simplify your portfolio. Complexity kills in a crisis. If you don't understand exactly what you own, you don't own it. You're just renting a feeling of safety. I tell investors all the time, you should be able to explain every asset you own in one sentence. If you can't, sell it. When the next downturn hits, the people holding the most complicated financial products will be the ones left holding the bag. I saw it with mortgage-backed securities in 2008. I'm seeing it now with leveraged bond funds and structured notes. They look sophisticated, but they're ticking time bombs. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is mindset. Because even if you do everything right financially, you can still lose emotionally if you don't train your thinking. One of the biggest mistakes seniors make during downturns is listening to panic narratives. They watch 24-hour news, they see red numbers, and they start to believe they're doomed. But markets recover, economies adapt, humanity moves forward. The people who come out stronger are the ones who focus on what they can control. You can't control the Federal Reserve, you can't control interest rates, but you can control your spending, your asset mix, your debt, and your level of preparation. That's what matters. So stop comparing your situation to anyone else's. The neighbor who's bragging about his stock returns might be sitting on a mountain of margin debt. The friend who says her house is worth $1 million might not be able to sell it for half that when the market turns. Ignore the noise, focus on fundamentals. And if you take nothing else from this talk, remember this: the measure of success isn't how much you own, it's how long you can stay calm when everyone else is losing their minds. Now, I said earlier that I'd share what I'm personally doing right now. Let me be transparent. I've sold certain equities not because I think the companies are bad, but because valuations have stretched too far. I've increased cash reserves. I've reduced exposure to long duration bonds because those are the most vulnerable if rates stay elevated. And most importantly, I've been quietly buying assets that produce essential goods and services, things people can't stop using no matter what happens: electric utilities, railroads, food producers. These are the kinds of businesses that survive every cycle because they solve human needs, not human desires. And that's the principle I'd encourage seniors to apply. Own what people must have, not what they merely want you in any environment. Let's take a moment to think about what the next 5 years could look like if trends continue. Inflation remains stubborn, interest rates stay higher for longer, government debt keeps climbing. That combination squeezes everyone from households to small businesses to entire cities. And when the squeeze gets bad enough, something breaks. It always does. In 2008, it was housing. In 2020, it was the supply chain. In the next crisis, it'll be retirement. That's the sector that's stretched beyond sustainability. Pensions are underfunded. Social Security is running deficits. Healthcare costs are exploding. And that means the burden will fall squarely on individuals, on seniors who thought they were safe. Now that sounds bleak, but it's also an opportunity for transformation. Because when the system forces you to rethink, it also forces you to improve. You can build independence from that system if you start now. Let's talk about community for a moment. I want you to comment below this video and tell me where you live, what city or state, and whether you've seen housing costs rise faster than your income. I want you to share your story because we need to see the pattern together. You're not alone in this. Millions of Americans are facing the same pressure, and if enough people start paying attention, we can make better decisions collectively. That's how we change the outcome, through awareness. Because the truth is, no government rescue plan, no stimulus, no new program will fix what's coming. The only fix is personal responsibility. You have to be your own central bank. That means holding reserves, managing risk, and thinking long term when everyone else is chasing short-term gains. That's how you win. Let me tell you something I've noticed over my career. The greatest fortunes are built in chaos. Not because chaos is good, but because it forces people to focus on what really matters. In 1974, after the market collapsed, everyone thought capitalism was finished. But those who stayed disciplined, those who understood value, made fortunes in the recovery. Now let's talk about timing, because that's the question on everyone's mind. The truth is, no one can pinpoint the exact moment when things might shift. But based on what I'm seeing, the signs suggest that change could be closer than many expect. The conditions are already in place. When you see governments printing more money while productivity stagnates, when you see households drowning in credit card debt while savings rates collapse, when you see older Americans borrowing just to pay property taxes, that's not stability, that's the prelude to correction. And when the correction begins, it doesn't announce itself, it creeps. First, you'll see a few for sale signs stay up longer than usual. Then prices start slipping quietly. Banks begin tightening lending standards. Appraisers get conservative. And before you know it, liquidity vanishes. That's when you'll hear people say, "We didn't see it coming," but you will. You'll remember this conversation and you'll know exactly what's happening. So, let's summarize. If you want to protect yourself, 1. Cut dependence on debt and variable income. 2. Treat your home as a financial asset, not a sentimental 1.3. Maintain at least 1 year of living expenses in cash or short-term reserves. 4. Simplify your investments. Own what you understand. 5. Focus on essential value assets, not speculative growth. 6. Stay calm and informed when the noise gets loud. If you do those things, you'll be among the minority who come through the next downturn stronger, not weaker. Because remember, wealth isn't measured by what you make during the good times. It's measured by what you keep during the bad times. Now, I want to close with a story. Years ago, I met an old farmer in Nebraska. He'd lived through the Dust Bowl, the Depression, World War II, the inflation of the 70s, you name it. I asked him once how he managed to survive all that turmoil. He said, "I never bet the farm." Simple words, but powerful. He understood something most people forget. Survival is the first rule of wealth. It doesn't matter how big your gains are if you lose everything in the next downturn. So don't bet the farm. Don't assume your home is untouchable, your pension guaranteed, your market safe. Protect yourself, your family, your dignity, because when the dust settles after this next crash, and it will settle, the people who survive will own the future. They'll own the homes, the businesses, the opportunities that others had to sell, and you can be one of them, but only if you start preparing now. If